if you read the classic rock press from the early 1970s, you get this very specific and honestly really dismissive narrative about Grand Funk Railroad.
Oh yeah, completely dismissive.
Right, like the critics routinely painted them as this crude, unrefined, just heavy volume band. They were written off as a wall of deafening noise for the masses.
Yeah, they said they lacked the sophistication of their peers, which is just wild.
It is, but I want you to completely forget that narrative for a second. Yeah. Instead, I want to transport you inside the Cleveland Recording Company. It is March 1970. The air in the room is thick with the smell of ozone from overdriven tube amplifiers, and you can hear the quiet mechanical hum of analog tape machines.
That classic studio smell.
Right, exactly. And a working-class power trio from Flint, Michigan is standing in that room, and they are about to do the impossible. They're about to fuse American hard rock with British symphonic progressive rock.
And, they aren't doing it with polish or pretension either.
No, not at all. They are achieving this using custom-hacked instruments, analog speaker cone distortion, and players from the elite Cleveland Orchestra. You're listening to Deep Cuts and Deep Thinking.
It's just a moment that completely shatters the critical establishment's understanding of what a heavy power trio was actually capable of achieving.
It really is. So welcome to this custom-tailored deep dive, where we are putting a magnifying glass over Grand Funk Railroad's absolute magnum opus, I'm Your Captain, or, closer to home.
It's a massive track.
We've gathered a huge stack of sources for you today. We're talking historical analyses, technical equipment logs, artist interviews, and original session data.
The real granular stuff.
Yeah, the good stuff. Our mission for this deep dive is to unpack exactly how a 10-minute symphonic epic fundamentally changed the trajectory of American arena rock.
So let's unpack this because before you can engineer an orchestral epic in a recording studio, you need the architectural foundation of the song itself.
Right. The blueprint.
Exactly. And this massive rock anthem actually came from a moment of literal unconscious inspiration. It started in the middle of the night.
Okay, set the scene for us.
So it starts at Mark Farner's rural farmhouse in Michigan. Farner, the songwriter, lead vocalist, and guitarist for the band, had this deeply ingrained kind of non-institutional spirituality.
Okay.
He maintained a habit of saying nightly prayers. And around early 1970, he started adding a very specific plea to that routine.
What was he asking for?
He actively asked for a song that would touch people's hearts. He wanted to write something that could reach and comfort people who were struggling.
Wow. Which is a fascinatingly vulnerable mindset for a frontman who makes his living playing in, one of the loudest rock bands on the planet.
Yeah, he's asking for a hymn, essentially.
Right.
And the response to that request arrives in a very unusual psychological state. One night, Farner wakes up abruptly at exactly 3 a.m.
3 a.m., exactly.
Yeah, and he finds himself in a liminal, semi-conscious state. That's that fleeting neurological space right between dreaming and waking up where, your conscious filters and self-critiques are totally down.
Oh, I know that feeling.
Right. So he grabs a legal steno pad and a pen that he keeps by his bed, and he just starts writing.
Just totally stream of consciousness.
Completely. It becomes an uninterrupted stream of phrasing. He doesn't pause to think about rhyme schemes. He doesn't edit. He doesn't even consciously read what he is writing down in the dark.
So he's not really writing a song in that moment. He's like taking dictation from his own subconscious.
That's a perfect way to put it.
He is blindly transcribing this narrative of a sick, mutinied sea captain who is adrift and losing control of his ship.
Yeah, and then he finishes writing, sets the pad down, and just goes back to sleep.
That is wild.
The actual musical discovery doesn't happen until the very next morning. He's sitting in his kitchen, drinking coffee, looking out at his horses in the pasture.
A very peaceful scene.
Yeah.
Very. And he picks up his George Washburn flat-top acoustic guitar. He wants to find a harmonic setting for these lyrics he wrote at 3 a.m. So he goes to strike a standard open G major chord, but his fingers slip on the fretboard. He misfrets the chord.
An accident, but a structurally profound one, right?
A total accident. Instead of a standard G major, he strikes an unfamiliar, highly resonant C major chord inversion.
Okay, for people who might not know, structurally, an inversion means that the root note of the chord isn't at the bottom. Another note from the chord is anchoring the sound.
Exactly.
And because the root isn't grounding it, an inversion often feels unresolved, unstable, and kind of floating.
Yeah, it refuses to settle down. So he lets this accidental floating chord ring out, and it just clicks.
Yeah.
It mirrors the feeling of a ship adrift at sea perfectly.
Oh, that's brilliant.
So he grabs the steno pad from the nightstand, and the cadence of his late-night lyrics maps perfectly onto this accidental drifting chordal progression. Okay, so he takes this incredibly delicate, floating acoustic framework, and he brings it to the Flint Musicians Union Hall.
To jam with his rhythm section.
Right, drummer Don Brewer and bass player Mel Shocker. We are talking about a fragile acoustic origin story, but Farner's usual stage gear was literal weapons-grade equipment.
It was aggressively loud.
Yeah. He played a 1967 Musicraft messenger guitar. That instrument featured an aluminum center spine neck, which creates a really harsh ringing sustain.
And it had a built-in fuzz circuit right on the guitar body, didn't it?
It did. You flip a switch and you get instant aggressive distortion. And he ran that guitar through a 200-watt West Laboratories Fillmore amplifier.
Which is just a massive amount of power.
It's like a muscle car mechanic sleepwalking, accidentally sketching the blueprints for a luxury sailing yacht and then bringing those blueprints into his greasy garage to build it.
That is exactly what it was like.
So how do you take a fragile, floating acoustic idea and feed it into 200-watt amplifiers without completely crushing it?
Well, that translates gets into the ultimate engineering puzzle. To take that acoustic vulnerability and turn it into a heavy rock track that could eventually support a full symphony, they couldn't just crank the volume and play loud.
Right, that would just bury everything.
Exactly. They needed to invent a completely new sonic floor in the studio. And to understand how they achieved that, we have to look at Mel Shaker's custom setup.
This is where the hardware actually dictates the art.
Yes. So Shaker played a 1960s Fender jazz bass. But on the recommendation of their manager and producer, Terry Knight, he heavily modified the instrument.
What did he do to it?
He literally routed out the wood of the body and installed a high-output Gibson EB Series humbucker pickup right at the neck position.
Oh, the Mudbucker.
Yes. That specific pickup earned the nickname the Mudbucker in the gear world because it is overwound and notoriously thick, dark, and heavy.
Wow. Okay, if I'm looking at this purely from an audio engineering standpoint, it sounds like extreme frequency management.
That's exactly what it is.
Because when a standard rock bass is played through heavy distortion, you get a lot of metallic upper mid-range harshness. That harshness clashes with the electric guitar.
It eats up all the space.
Right.
Yeah.
But more importantly for this specific project, it would absolutely collide with a delicate classical string section.
Oh, it would be a disaster.
So by using the Mudbucker pickup, Shaker is creating this deep, rounded, massive, low-end thump with almost zero harsh upper frequencies.
That is the exact mechanism at play here. Because the tone is so round and deep, it allows Shaker to play a very prominent melodic lead bass style.
Lead bass, right.
Yeah, he's playing all these complex counter melodies around Farner's chords. But because he has removed all the treble and mid-range from his signal, he leaves the entire upper frequency spectrum wide open for the orchestra.
It's sonic real estate. He basically bought the basement so the orchestra could eventually have the penthouse.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yes. And by keeping the middle floors entirely empty, the cellos and violas don't have to compete with the bass guitar to be heard.
That's so smart.
But, you know, while they carved out space for the strings, they still needed to capture the sheer physical weight of a working-class rock band.
Right. They're still Grand Funk Railroad.
Exactly. And that requires Ken Hayman at Cleveland Recording Company. They were tracking the session on an Ampex MM1000 16-track recorder.
Okay.
And Hayman used a technique we can call the cone distortion trick. To get that massive saturated texture on the bass and guitars, Hayman didn't overdrive the studio console.
He kept the preamplifiers completely clean, right?
Completely clean. Instead, he pushed the band's tube-powered West amplifiers so hard that the physical speaker cones inside the JBL cabinets were actually distorting.
Wait, hold on.
Yeah.
If Hayman is intentionally pushing those amplifiers so hard that the physical speaker cones are distorting, essentially vibrating so violently they're ripping themselves apart, wouldn't that just create a muddy frequency nightmare in the room?
You would think so, yeah.
How are you supposed to fit a delicate flute or a cello over the sound of a speaker cone violently distorting?
That is where the technology of the Ampex MM1000 saves the day. In 1970, having a 16-track recorder was an immense luxury.
Because of the track isolation.
Exactly. It meant Hayman could isolate that violent physical speaker distortion onto its own specific lanes on the magnetic tape, keeping the remaining tracks completely pristine and empty for the orchestra.
Oh, wow.
Furthermore, Hayman subtly shifts the audio profile throughout the song. During the first movement, the aggressive rock narrative about the mutiny, he relies heavily on that cone distortion.
But then he changes it.
Yeah, as the song progresses toward the symphonic section, he pulls back the aggressive distortion. He gives Shucker a cleaner, warmer signal chain that perfectly integrates with the acoustic low end of a symphony.
So they have this beautiful, massive floor plan for the song. They have the sonic real estate mapped out. But they're still a power trio used to playing 4-minute headbangers. They hit a structural wall.
A huge wall.
They had a verse and a chorus, but they didn't know how to write an ending that could actually hold an orchestra.
Yeah.
They hit a creative dead end.
Right, which required an outside visionary to force them out of their comfort zone.
And that visionary arrives in the form of Tommy Baker. He was a Cleveland-based trumpet virtuoso and the orchestral arranger for a syndicated pop rock TV show called Upbeat.
Yeah, Farner had met him at the television studios and was just blown away by his ability to weave classical instrumentation into pop music.
So the band brings the demo of I'm Your Captain to Baker, and Baker gives them a direct mandate that fundamentally changes the structure of the song.
And Baker's exact instruction to the band for the outro jam is fascinating.
Let me quote it. He told them, when you get to the end chorus, just keep going. But when you are bored with it, I want you to go past that. I want you to ring that song out.
Ring it out. It is an incredibly demanding piece of musical direction.
It really is.
Baker realized the song needed a compound binary structure. It had to be two entirely distinct movements. The first half is a standard 44 rock suite, the tense narrative of a sick captain facing a mutiny from his crew.
But then at exactly 4 minutes and 30 seconds in, that traditional rock structure dissolves completely.
Yeah, they accomplished that dissolution using analog tape loops of ocean waves and crying seagulls.
Which makes perfect sense mechanically. They needed an audio palette cleanser.
Yeah.
You have to wash away the aggression and the distortion of the first half so the listener's brain can reset for the second half.
The tape loops bridge the gap perfectly, and then the silent movement begins.
The shift.
Yeah, the band downshifts into a halftime, hypnotic, repetitive coda centered entirely on the vocal chant. I'm getting closer to my home.
You know, on paper, telling a rock band to play past boredom sounds like terrible advice. You're just begging for a tedious record.
Right, it sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Unless he wasn't looking for a traditional musical performance at all. He was trying to force them into a trance.
That's exactly it. If we look at the psychology of musical performance, playing past boredom forces a musician to stop thinking intellectually and start feeling bodily.
Oh, absolutely.
When you play a 4-bar phrase 20 or 30 times in a row, the ego drops away. You stop trying to throw in fancy drum fills or complex guitar licks just to show off.
You submit entirely to the groove.
Yes. It creates a hypnotic, meditative state. Don Brewer's drums transform from a rock beat into a ceremonial march. Shaker's bass line becomes a repetitive mantra.
A baseline mantra.
Exactly. That endless repetition is exactly what gives Tommy Baker's strings the runway they need to slowly build layer by layer over 5 minutes.
Which sets up what I think is the most astonishing part of this entire deep dive.
Oh, the Epiphany.
Yes, the Blind Orchestral Epiphany.
Yeah.
When Grand Funk recorded that endless meditative groove in the studio, they had absolutely no idea what the orchestra was going to do over it.
Not at all.
They jammed on that repeating riff completely blind. They weren't even in the building when Tommy Baker brought in the elite members of the Cleveland Orchestra, the flutes, the violas, the cellos.
The band handed over their master tapes to an arranger and literally left the state to go on tour.
That's insane.
The sheer amount of trust involved in that decision is staggering.
It's like painting half of a canvas, handing your brush to a total stranger, leaving the room, and just hoping they don't ruin your masterpiece.
Pretty much.
And they didn't even hear the result until Terry Knight brought the final symphonic mix back to Flint 2 weeks later.
And when he played it for the band, Farner and Brewer were so overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the orchestra welling up over their instruments, they described hearing it as a literal religious experience.
A religious experience that they now had to package and sell to the public. Because creating a sprawling masterpiece in a controlled studio is one thing.
Right, what happens when it enters the commercial market?
Exactly. In the summer of 1970, this massive studio gamble paid off artistically. But the track had to be fractured into 2 completely different formats to survive the realities of the music industry.
Because the radio landscape of 1970 was heavily segregated by format. Capitol Records knew they had a masterpiece, but daytime AM pop radio was strictly formatted for 3-minute songs.
A 10-minute symphonic epic was never going to get past the station managers.
No way. So they created a duality. Capitol issued a heavily edited single for AM radio that chopped the song down to 5 minutes and 31 seconds.
Oh, that hurts to hear.
They removed the long transitions and faded it out just as the orchestra was really getting going.
But even in that truncated form, the AM radio edit was a massive hit. It peaked at number 22 on the Billboard Hot 100.
Peaking at number 22 was a massive validation for a band the critics had entirely written off.
Definitely.
But at the exact same time, a brand new broadcasting format was emerging progressive FM album rock radio.
Right, the underground stations.
Yes. Unlike AM radio, these underground FM DJs weren't constrained by time limits. They completely ignored the edited single. They put the full 10-minute and 9-second album master into heavy rotation.
So you had pop audiences consuming the concise rock narrative, while the counterculture was absorbing the expansive, trance-like symphonic suite.
Which is a brilliant dual exposure.
And that dual exposure is what leads us to the socio-historical resonance of the song. Farner wrote this in his bedroom from a spiritual prayer about a literal mutiny on a 19th century ship.
But when it hit the airwaves, who actually latched onto it?
It was immediately adopted by American service members deployed during the Vietnam War.
We are looking at the sociological reality of 1970. The factual context was that hundreds of thousands of troops in Southeast Asia were experiencing profound operational fatigue and geographic dislocation.
Right.
There were widespread anti-establishment sentiments, both at home and within the military ranks. And over Armed Forces Radio comes a song about a captain who is sick, who has lost control of his situation, who is adrift in hostile territory.
And who is endlessly repeating the mantra, "I'm getting closer to my home."
Exactly.
The duality of the lyrics is staggering. Farner is sitting in a peaceful Michigan farmhouse, writing about a sick-sea captain. But the listener hears a soldier pinned down in a foxhole, or a generation entirely lost in political turmoil.
It's incredible.
How does the ambiguity of that specific phrase, closer to home, allow millions of people to project their own lived experiences onto it so perfectly?
Well, the psychological power of the song lies in the fact that it never actually resolves the narrative. In the first half, the captain asks his crew to return his ship. But we never find out if he quells the mutiny. We never find out if he drowns.
It's open-ended.
Completely. All narrative specificity just drops away in the second half. The word home becomes an empty vessel. The listener instinctively fills that vessel with their own deepest desire.
That makes total sense.
For a drafted soldier experiencing operational fatigue, home is a literal physical return to the United States. For someone struggling with a physical illness, home is a return to health.
And for Farner himself, home might have represented a spiritual transcendence.
Exactly. Because the song doesn't lecture the listener, it provides a massive emotional space for the listener to inhabit.
Which brings us to the ultimate culmination of this cultural resonance. July 9th, 1971. Grand Funk Railroad headlines Shea Stadium in New York.
An iconic show.
They sell out 55,000 tickets in just 72 hours. A box office velocity that actually outpaced the Beatles when they played Shea Stadium.
Which is just a mind-blowing statistic.
And when Grand Funk played I'm Your Captain that night, they obviously didn't have the Cleveland Orchestra with them on stage.
No, it was just the three of them on that massive stage.
But they didn't need the orchestra, because that live crowd of 55,000 people singing that hypnotic coda, They became the real symphonic arrangement.
The audience replaced the classical strings with their own voices.
Yeah. The song had transformed from an isolated studio achievement into a massive communal ritual.
The critics who called Grand Funk Railroad crude totally missed the point of the music.
Completely missed it.
The band didn't need to prove their intellectual superiority to the rock press. They proved that a heavy rock riff, a driving bass line, and an emotionally transparent vocal could make a mass audience feel entirely understood and less alone.
Let's zoom out and look at the whole picture here. I'm Your Captain, closer to home, achieved something that seemed structurally impossible. It bridged the vast gap between working class, power trio, blues rock, and the high art concepts of symphonic progressive rock.
By fusing cone distortion with delicate cellos, they completely silenced the critical establishment by sheer force of public will.
It created a permanent milestone in classic rock history, driving the album multi-platinum and cementing their legacy.
It really remains the defining artistic breakthrough of their career.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. Something to take with you long after you take off your headphones.
Okay, let's hear it.
Think about the incredible, unpredictable journey of this composition. It starts as a private, unconscious prayer spoken into the dark of a Michigan farmhouse bedroom at 3 a.m. It gets hammered into shape by sleep-deprived musicians, heavily modified bass guitars, and analog speaker cones pushed to the breaking point. It gets handed over to classical strangers to paint with strings.
An amazing evolution.
And it ends up in a roaring stadium with 55,000 people singing it back as a secular hymn of survival. It raises the ultimate question about art. Once the song is recorded, pressed onto vinyl, and released into the world, does it still belong to the person who wrote it in the middle of the night? Or does it permanently belong to the people who use it to survive?
That is a great question.
If you like this episode, please like and subscribe.